Hello everyone, and welcome back again. Today we are going to recap the 2005 movie The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The story begins during World War II. An air raid has taken place, and bombs are being dropped over London. The main characters in this story are 4 children. From youngest to oldest, we have Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter. Edmund standing by the window watching the airplanes. His mother pulls him away, ordering the boys to get to shelter. Susan grabs Lucy, who's still in the bed, terrified. Before they can get to the shelter, Edmund runs back into the house for their father. Peter runs after him. Edmund grabs a picture of their father, who's fighting the war, and the two manage to get back to the shelter safely. Peter's shouting at Edmund for being selfish, asking why he can't just do as he's told. All the while, Edmund clutches the picture of their father, and their mother hugs him. Sometime later, the kids are at the train station, being evacuated with a lot of other children. Edmund's complaining that if their father were there, he wouldn't make them leave. Peter replies that if their father were there, there'd be no war, and they wouldn't even have to fight. The mother tells Edmund to listen to his brother, and Peter promises to look after his younger siblings. The mother hugs each of her children, and they make their tearful goodbyes. The 4 kids get on the train, each with a ticket visible on front of their clothes, like all the other children aboard the train, and then we see them all waving to their parents as that train departs. When the children are eventually dropped off, now in the countryside, they're approached by a woman in a carriage pulled by a horse. This is Mrs. McCready, who's going to be looking after them until the war's done. They really don't have a lot of luggage, saying it's just them, and Mrs. McCready takes them back to what is their new home. They get on the carriage. McCready tells them pretty sternly they're not used to children in their house, which is large and spacious. She tells them the rules of the house, and that night, the children try to settle in for their first night. Peter and Susan comfort Lucy, who's complaining about the bed being uncomfortable. Peter tells her how great it'll be here, how large the grounds are, and how tomorrow they can play outside. Well, tomorrow it kinda rains, so they all stay inside. Edmund and Susan pore over books to pass the time, Lucy suggesting to play hide and seek, and the other children agree, running away from Peter, who starts the count. Edmund and Susie hide, and Lucy finds a room, which is empty, save for a single wardrobe. It's covered by a big sheet. She smiles up at it before opening the door and stepping in. Inside, we have some thick coats. She walks backwards, further and further, until she sees trees and snow. Well, she turns around fully and sees a whole new world beginning to explore. Everything is just so beautiful. Lucy finds the single lamp in the middle of the clearing. She touches it and then hears movement around her in the trees. Mr. Tumnus appears. At first, the two are scared of each other and hide, but Lucy eventually steps out from behind the post and picks up the package Mr. Tumnus dropped. Lucy sees his fawn legs, and the two introduce each other. Lucy tells him that she's a girl, and Mr. Tumnus says that they're in a place called Narnia. Lucy's like it's an awfully big wardrobe. Mr. Tumnus invites her to tea, and Lucy agrees, helping him to carry his parcels. Inside his home, it's all warm and cozy, and the two are talking about their fathers briefly, and how they both went to war. Lucy mentions Christmas, and Mr. Tumnus says that they haven't had Christmas in Narnia for 100 years. Lucy's shocked at that. No presents for 100 years? Mr. Tumnus explains that it's always winter, and never Christmas. So he plays some music for Lucy while she's drinking tea. She begins to fall asleep, waking up sometime later to find Mr. Tumnus in the dark, and he confesses that he had told the White Witch of her presence, and that she's coming to capture her. So feeling guilty, he helps her escape. So Lucy returns back to the world where her siblings are now staying at, rushes down the corridor, saying that she's all right. She finds that no time has passed at all in her own world, and Peter, who has finished counting, finds her. She explains that she was gone for hours, and shows him the wardrobe, but now it just looks kinda normal. The 2 eldest are saying that they don't believe her, and Lucy gets upset. Edmund says that he believes her, but Peter argues with him, telling him that he's just making everything worse. So now everyone's upset with each other, and Lucy closes the door to the wardrobe, unable to sleep that night. Lucy visits that cupboard again. This time, Edmund follows her. She steps into Narnia for the second time. Edmund, who tries to find her, steps in there as well. Now Edmund finds snow and the lamppost moments later. He's a bit cold and begins to wander around, searching for Lucy, but instead is found by the White Witch, who uses her magic to make him a Turkish delight, a kinda sweet. The White Witch asks him to return with his siblings before leaving him in the snow. Lucy meets Edmund and they return back to their world, And the next day, while playing outside, they manage to break a window, running to hide from Mrs. Macready. They hide in the wardrobe, and all four of them find Narnia once more. Lucy takes them all to meet Mr. Tumnus, only to find his place has been ransacked. Peter pulls a notice that has been nailed to the wall. It reads that Mr. Tumnus has been jailed for treason by the Queen of Narnia. So the four of them go outside, where they meet a talking beaver who knows Lucy by name. The beaver hands them a handkerchief Lucy gave to Mr. Tumnus previously. Mr. Beaver brings the four of them to his home, telling him that woods aren't safe at night. Here they meet Mrs. Beaver and are welcomed into their house with some food and drink. The four are told about the lion Aslan, who's returned from being away for a long while. He'll be waiting for the siblings at the stone table. Mr. Beaver then explains the prophecy, telling him that the two sons of Adam and the two daughters of Eve will help defeat the White Witch and save Narnia. Susan says that they were sent away so that they wouldn't get caught up in a war. Peter tries to leave, telling the beavers that they're not the ones, and that there must be some kind of mistake, only to find that Edmund is missing. They try and stop him, but by the time they see him, he's already walking into that White Witch's palace. Not knowing what else to do, they ask the beaver to take him to meet Aslan. Meanwhile, inside the courtyard of the Ice Palace, Edmund finds the figures of many creatures, frozen into stone. He's startled by a sleeping wolf. Edmund explains who he is, and the wolf takes him to the throne room, where he meets the queen. She's kind of angry at him for not bringing his siblings with, but he tells her that he brought them halfway, telling her exactly where they are. The White Witch sends her scouts to hunt them down. Edmund, now realizing his mistake, the hut is surrounded by the wolves, who find a secret passage inside the house. The beavers and the siblings manage to escape, blocking the tunnel. Here they find more statues of frozen creatures, victims of the witch. A fox appears, another talking animal, and he agrees to help them escape the wolves. When the wolves manage to break through that barricade, who tells them that the fugitives ran north, the wolves run off to sniff them out, and the others get down from the tree. The fox leaves them, saying that Aslan himself had asked him to gather more troops. Peter says they don't want to go to war. They want their brother back. In the meantime, at the witch's palace, Edmund's in the dungeons, chained to the floor and shivering. He meets Mr. Tumnus inside the cell beside him, and he asks if Lucy's all right, but Edmund doesn't know. The White Witch appears, telling Edmund that her wolves could not find his siblings. Edmund tells the witch that Aslan has returned, and she sets off to find the others, Susan, Peter, and Lucy, still traveling with the beavers to the stone table where Aslan is meant to be. As they're walking across a frozen lake, they see a sleigh from a distance and begin to run, reaching the tree line and finding a place to hide. Mr. Beaver checks out the coast, telling the others to come out, and they see none other than Santa, who tells the siblings that hope is beginning to weaken the witch's power. He gives the three of them each a gift. Lucy gets a magical potion that will cure any injury, alongside a knife. Susan gets a bow and a sheath of arrows, alongside a horn to call for help. And Peter gets a beautiful sword with runes etched into the blade. Santa says, "Long live Aslan," and Merry Christmas, before getting on his sleigh and just riding away. Susan, Peter, and Lucy, along with the beavers, make their way onwards, reaching the frozen lake, which is now beginning to break up as winter is coming to an end. The frozen wall of the lake begins to break, and Susan, Lucy, and Peter, who have become trapped in the middle of the river by the wolves, manage to escape on a piece of ice. Holding onto that sword, Peter stabbed into the ice to keep him steady. The beavers escape safely with them, easily able to swim. The five manage to get back onto land, seeing a tree in bloom. The flowers, all pretty and pink, begin to blossom before their eyes. The three leave their coats behind, the air beginning to get a bit warmer now. They continue without him, while back at the waterfall, the witch, having reached the river, finds it flowing freely. All the ice has completely thawed. The wolves caught the fox, who deceived them, and the witch lifts her staff, preparing to turn the fox to stone. Edmund tries to save the fox, telling her where the others were heading, to the stone table, where Aslan is building his army. So the witch thanks Edmund before turning the fox into stone anyways. Our other three heroes with the beaver have reached the palace the army's gathering at. The fields are green now, and there's a lot of different types of creatures gathered here, including human-shaped ones made out of flower petals. Peter, Susan, and Lucy look around in awe at the centaurs, cats, boars, fawn, bears, and other creatures as they all stare right back at them. They approach the red and gold tent, and Aslan steps out. Everyone bows to him. Aslan welcomes them all, but asks where Edmund is. Peter's explaining that Edmund was captured by the White Witch, and the beaver explains how, saying Edmund had betrayed him. Aslan and Peter are seen on a hilltop talking, looking at the shining castle in the distance, the castle of 4 thrones, one of which Peter will sit as High King. Aslan explains about the deep magic that rules over all those who live in Narnia, one that governs all their destinies. Peter then hears a horn sound, Susan's horn, and runs to find her and Lucy, having climbed a tree and now are trapped by two wolves. Aslan kills one of them, and Aslan lets the other go, telling the others to follow him, saying that the wolf will lead them to Edmund. Aslan knights Peter, and when he rises, Peter is now known as Sir Peter Wolfsbane, Knight of Narnia. Back at the witches' camp with an army made up of scary creatures like trolls, cyclops, minotaurs, and other beasts are preparing for war. The witch is going through the battle tactics with her general, a minotaur. Now Aslan's scouts rescue Edmund and bring him back to Aslan's camp. Edmund's reunited with his siblings. Aslan tells him there's no need to speak about what has passed. Peter tells the rest of them to go home while he stays to protect Narnia, but Lucy refuses to leave, and Edmund says he's seen what the White Witch can do and wants to help to make the wrongs right again. Susan decides to also stay, getting in some practice with her archery, while the brothers ride around on horseback and practice some sword fighting. Mr. Beaver rushes up to him, saying that the witch has demanded a meeting with Aslan and is on her way. When she arrives, the witch tells Aslan that they have a traitor in their midst, Edmund, and according to law, all traitors belong to her and that Edmund shall be killed, as is tradition. Aslan agrees to talk to the witch alone, and they enter a sidebar tent together. Sometime later, the witch leaves the tent, and Aslan declares that the witch has renounced her claim on Edmund, but he really doesn't share all the information about that deal. In Edmund's place, Aslan has offered himself to be killed by the witch, and that night, Lucy and Susan see the witch kill Aslan at the stone table and deploy an army to slaughter his troops. Edmund encourages Peter to take command. In the morning, both armies clash in battle. Aslan is resurrected, citing magic beyond the witch's understanding, and takes Susan and Lucy to the witch's castle to free the petrified prisoners. Edmund is mortally wounded after breaking the witch's wand with his sword while saving Peter, but reinforcements arrive and Aslan kills the witch. Edmund is healed by Lucy's cordial, and the Pevensies are crowned King Peter the Magnificent, Queen Susan the Gentle, King Edmund the Just, and Queen Lucy the Valiant. 15 years later, the siblings, now adults, pursue a white stag. They encounter the lamppost that Lucy first saw when she entered Narnia. They cross back through the wardrobe, and since hardly any time in their world has passed since they left, they become children again. Professor Kirke asks why they were in the wardrobe. Peter says he wouldn't believe them, and he responds, "Try me." In a mid-credit scene, Lucy attempts to use the wardrobe again, but Professor Kirke tells her he has also tried, and they will probably return to Narnia when they least expect it.